There we go. All right, calling the meeting to order at 6:03. We do not have an official secretary. Do we have a volunteer or shall we just? Charles,
I'll volunteer.
thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And appreciate that. Let's have a moment of silence. Just bring our best to this meeting. Thank you. Ideally, we'd be approving the minutes of our November meeting right now. And I know that Mike was working on a draft, but I don't know if anybody's noticed he's challenging Paul Davis to, I'm calling it a tome. It is a very complete rendition of it, and it's not quite done, not ready for approval. Can we agree to approve it by email as soon as he gets that completed, please? And then we can get it to the county and get it posted on the website. Can we agree to that?
Yes.
Pardon? Okay, thank you. Internal business, we've got some upcoming vacancies. Have we all been out recruiting? What have we heard about who might be raising their hand? Because I think it's pretty important work here. We got Mike and Roland.
I'm working on one fellow who is a retired Air Force maintenance guy and lives out in the county. And we'll see who we can do with him. He appears to be quite sure.
It would be great to have a good mainland person on here. I appreciate that. Let's do that. So thank you for that.
Jim, could you tell us just a little bit more? Why would your potential candidate be interested in the ferry?
Well, most of the time when he was in the Air Force, he worked in keeping fleets of aircraft going. An officer in charge of lots of maintenance and other things. Has a real good grasp of what it takes to keep a good service going, basically.
Great.
Also learning how to fly right now. After years, he says, after years of fixing him, he's finally learning how to fly.
Well, that'd be excellent. That sounds like a very interesting possibility. Okay. And Mike Skehan, welcome to the meeting. And Roland, thank you for being here. Appreciate that. Any other, I did hear Tom Philpott was considering applying. Mike, are you considering applying? Mike?
No, I'm at Arches National Park. Right.
Okay, you're just waving. Okay.
In Moab, Utah.
Well, welcome. You probably get the furthest member award here. All right. Well, thank you for that update. And a hybrid versus in-person format. We are, of course, all Zoom this time. And I have, based on our conversation at the last meeting, I have submitted an application to LIFAC to see if they might fund us. And they were discussing it at their board meeting is that a possible action item, funding item for us to meet at the Grange in the coming year for certain hybrid meetings. And Mary Ross said she would try to facilitate making it a part Zoom and part in-person meeting at the Grange, but we need funding. I have no idea if that'll come through, but I just wanted to report the application was submitted in a timely fashion and is being considered. So I did follow up on that. And point 3 on our calendar, coordination or agenda, coordination of listserv updates. That's kind of code for the fact that Nancy Ging has announced she is really retiring from managing our announcements list and our Google Groups lists. And I am wondering if there is anybody else familiar enough with Google to take on just managing those lists into the future. I am not that person. I don't know, is that something that Judy, you might take on? Are you familiar enough with Google Groups?
I'm really not, Rayma.
Okay,
I'm trying to think who we could ask maybe. Robert Keller comes to mind.
okay.
Yeah, I don't have that skill set.
I don't either, which is why I just,
Yeah.
up until now, said, thank you, Nancy. Okay. All right, well, I'm happy to reach out to Robert, or are you, because he's a neighbor, right?
Yeah, sure, I could reach out. I could do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe he has another idea, and maybe it's something that he could just teach me and set me up with, and then I could do it.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
Unless anybody else have any other ideas on that. No, it's not that hard.
It is,
Sorry, could you say his name again, Judy?
That's Robert Keller.
And who is he?
He's my neighbor. He's an IT guy, and he is quite involved with Nextdoor, and he's also the guy who set up the webcam for the ferry traffic, if that rings a bell.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
that'd be great. So any other ideas though? Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, one other thing. Is it okay to put his name in the minutes, or would you like to talk to him first? Judy?
Why don't we make it nameless?
Okay, that's fine.
I'll reach
Just
out to someone
as
else.
your scribe, I'm just checking as we go along. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
That sounds fair. Thanks.
Other internal issues to take a minute to discuss? Okay, so Rich, do you have an update for us?
Sure,
Thank you.
you bet. It's kind of a brief one. We haven't had anything too exciting happening, which I'm grateful for, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, I'll jump into it here. So we lost one of our full-time crew members. He's still above ground and alive. I maybe shouldn't have put it that way, but Kent Dixon has moved on, separated from Whatcom County, and he was our full-time purser, and he was a part-time captain. He was also our assistant engineer. So we're feeling the loss of Kent a little bit, but separated on great terms. He just was ready to go on and pursue other things, more to his liking. So we've lost Kent, and bon voyage, Kent. It was great having him around, and he provided a lot of support to our engineer, Gary Poole, and as was he a really great mentor for a lot of the younger crew members coming up. So we're going to miss it. However, given that news, our old retired friend Brian Thurber decided to come back and join us. So Brian is going to be doing a little training next week on the Whatcom Chief to kind of dust his chops off, and then he's going to get back with us as an on-call captain. So I'm pretty excited about that. One of the good things about anytime when anybody who's been with the program as long as Kent has, which I believe was just over 10 years, allows for a lot of other folks to kind of move up. So promotions are going to Theo White. He's going to become a full-time deckhand. And also Glenn Hoekstra. He's moving up to full-time purser. And there is one other person that will move up from an on-call position to a benefited relief position. but that is yet to be decided, as we need to conduct interviews and go through that whole formal process. But anyway, it's got the crew buzzing, and it's all fine and all good, actually. Let's see.
Rich, before you move on, could you just give us an idea of the various levels within how many
Sure.
people altogether, full-time, part-time, the various levels that people advance through, so that everyone has a clear idea of the human resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the Whatcom Chief, as you know, we always have 3 full-time crew members scheduled to be on board for both the AM and the PM shift. And so the way that looks is we've got 3 full-time captains, which would be myself, Gary Poole, and John Mulhern. We have 3 full-time pursers, which now would be Janet Roop, Tom Phillips, and Glenn Hoekstra. Then we also have 3 full-time deckhands, which now will be Doug Cash, Serena Dabney, and Theo White. And then we have 3 full-time relief people, which is, let's see here, we got Greg Davis, Gabe Brady, and then there will be one other that we'll pick up out of our on-call staff. And the on-call staff are on-call unbenefited employees that are just on call. And that would be Morgan Shermer, Annie Justice, Kelsey McLean, Mike Hammis, Bob McCaslin, Mark Richardson, Brian Thurber. There's a bunch of them. Dan Owens.
How many are there on call?
Oh boy, let's see. We usually have anywhere between 5 and 7 on calls.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that pool is so deep is because typically that job really speaks to folks who either are already retired and they have no interest in moving up through the program, but they still want to be a part of the program and get down there and work outside and enjoy some public service. But then there's also the really sort of oftentimes younger, more hungry on calls that are competitive and looking to move up. So.
Okay, thank you.
You said Janet Rupp is a purser? I thought she retired, but she's
Nope.
No,
She was working yesterday. Yep, she
yeah, I
was
seen her on there, but I thought that she was like on call. And who was the other purser?
let's see, there's Janet Roop, there is Tom Phillips,
Oh,
and now Glenn Hoekstra.
okay, thanks.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah. Let's see. I've been spending a bunch of time with Elizabeth Kosa, kind of putting together all the necessary means to support the upcoming, which is going to be happening sooner than we think, the upcoming bid process for our dockside maintenance that will be in May this year. We had our first meeting with all of our internal public works crews that support that effort every year. And we nailed down some tentative dates, which right now, very tentative, but I will share them with you. It's tentatively May 6th, Friday, May 6th through the 20th of May. And that's it's about 2 weeks, but we're blocking out 2 weeks just to be sure we're blocking out enough time in our minds to nail down anything that needs to get done on the Whatcom Chief during that time. That time may shrink a little bit, but it's not going to get any wider. Won't get any longer. So Elizabeth and I are going to continue working on the bid spec and hopefully have all that language dialed in for the contract, hopefully the first couple of weeks of January. So we're moving it along pretty quickly.
Well, what will happen during this period of May 6th to 20th? How will ferry users experience this?
Just as you have in the past with a regular maintenance period, we'll have the floats. We'll have the passenger vessel providing service.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure yet whether or not we may have a ramp that needs to be installed on the Lummi Island side, because there's a small punch list of electrical work that may need to be taken care of. So we're looking into that. We've got electrical company that has we have an on-call contract with, Becca Electrical. They're going to come out and assess some of that business. So that's, Purcell Painting. They're still working on the Gooseberry Point dock, believe it or not, but they've been rained out pretty sufficiently here in the last month or so, but they are closing in on it. They're getting just enough dry weather at night, I guess, to kind of start buttoning things up. So hopefully that'll be over with soon. It's not something that, you're noticing during the day, but it is happening at night when weather permits. Recently, we all got our first aid CPR training renewed for most of the crew that needed it. Dan Ohms, who is one of our on-call deckhands, who also, as you know, was a retired paramedic and still is currently still credentialed. And so he provides that service to us, which we really like. He's a really great instructor and actually still continues to do that professionally for the refineries and subcontracts out to them and other folks as well. So anyway, we got that done. That was really, really good. We've got an upcoming maintenance outage on the 15th of this month. It's a fairly important one because not only are we performing the regular maintenance and care that our terminal facilities require, but we're also going to be fixing a little hydraulic problem over at the Gooseberry Point terminal. The mechanics finally got all the parts in to fix it. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but if you're on the front of the ferry and you're coming into Gooseberry Point, oftentimes the apron will be like, weeping down like this. It's not that big of a deal really, unless you're in a bad storm and things go sideways with the ferry and the ferry can't get under it and could damage it. But it's all been taken care of and dealt with very delicately. But we're going to be happy to have that little issue fixed on the 15th. That's kind of all of the things that I could not just off the top of my head, but really that's all that's been really happening, which, as I said before, I'm pretty happy about because it's more business as usual instead of some sort of emergency. So we're happy about that. As far as the weather station goes, got some really good news late yesterday that it sounds as though Northwest Clean Air is close to sponsoring the full cost of the weather station.
Wow.
Sounds like they're going to be discussing that at tomorrow's board meeting that they have. I'm going to give the director of Northwest Clean Air, Mark Buford, a phone call tomorrow, and hopefully he's available and I can chat with him a little bit about it, just to make sure we're all clear about each other's expectations surrounding the weather station. But I mean, I think we're getting pretty close. Pretty exciting.
Where would it be located, Rich? Would it be where would that weather station be? Just above your office there at the terminal, or where?
Well, we could. That's definitely something that we'd discuss with the company that'll install the equipment, because they probably know better than I do where best suited that would be. But if I had to take a guess, I would say it would most likely go where the existing one was, which was at the top of the blue structures on the at the Lemmy Island terminal.
Okay.
So up there, and it has, I believe there's a camera as well, so you get a nice shot of Hales Passage and be able to see what the wave action what it looks like to ride the Whatcom Chief that day if you're feeling a little nervous about the weather. So there's some pretty exciting things I think associated with it that'll be beneficial not only for reasons of keeping up with the weather, but also Whatcom County work crew, general public being able to just even hop on there and take a look, see what the water's doing, see what the weather's doing, and the Whatcom Chief as well. So,
Rich, could you maybe shoot me a note tomorrow, depending on what the outcome of this is, because it would be nice to put it in the minutes, yes or no. It was funded plus. And the camera will be a video camera on the web, right? So when you said anyone could look at it.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. I shouldn't get too far ahead of myself. I haven't done a whole lot of legwork associated with the weather station. That information I've been getting verbally from pretty much from John Mulhern and Mike McKenzie. So
Mhm.
now that it looks like it's going to happen, I'm going to dive into it and give it attention. But yes, I believe so. That's really all I have operationally, unless you guys have any questions.
I have a question. Rema?
No, I was just gonna say, I'm not sure, is anybody else gonna do an update from the emergency planning perspective? And I know one of the issues that was brought up at last month's meeting was that even if there was some sort of boat that landed near the ferry dock, that the riprap it cannot be negotiated in an emergency. Is there any further talk or planning to accommodate whatever efforts are going on in that arena?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
They're just that those conversations have not been had with me, and I don't think they've been had with anybody else either. I think the idea was the last I sort of when I checked in with Mary Ross last we spoke, I believe the intent was to get the Parks Department involved and then actually use the steps that are existing that go up to the Parks Department landing there right across the street from the Beach Store Cafe. I believe that's where that conversation was headed.
Okay, all right. I just didn't know
But
further thought about
yes.
how to use the ferry parking lot area to access other boats, even if the terminal itself at the dock didn't accommodate them.
I think the answer would be you would park and you would walk to the, you'd park in the ferry parking lot and then walk over to the steps, I'm guessing.
Okay.
That certainly would work. As far as Public Works dedication to continue to have a much more efficient, quicker way to dispatch floating ramps in the future, that is still very much in our crosshairs. But that's, to my knowledge, that's all Public Works is up to at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Charles.
Yeah, Rich, we certainly agree with you that it's nice that you don't have much to report compared to previous ones. But my question is really looking towards the future. And we've seen since the last dry dock, now last fall, a number of incidents involving the rudders, the engine and so forth. And this boat, as we all know, is getting older. And it's got to get us through to at least 2026, 5 more years. And I'm wondering if you and your colleagues, what you're thinking about this. I assume that there is, by definition, not much experience with elder care for aging ferries in your department. But what can you do, or what are you thinking about that will try to anticipate and head off? I know you're having more frequent maintenance, but is there a systematic way of projecting the kinds of bad things that might happen so they can be headed off over the next 5 years?
That's a great question, Charles. I mean, one of the things we're talking about doing it's a really simple thing to do. When engines get to be of a certain age, we can start sending the oil off for testing. Which can, depending on, and I know Jim's familiar with this, sort of depending on the level of scrutiny you want to scrutinize the oil at, it can give you a whole host of information and can really fire some pretty nice warning shots before catastrophe occurs. So we're going to look into doing that after the first of the year. As far as the steering systems go, and I know I've touched on this a little bit in the past, is that really the disappointing part about all those steering failures where it's the same piece of equipment that's always plagued us, which is these rudder feedback units that live in the steering compartments. which are, it's a terrible environment for rudder feedback units to live in, although that's where they live, whether it's the Whatcom Chief or a state ferry or any other ferry, that's just simply where they reside. We're looking into whether or not we can move them into our engine room and use cables to do the same job that those rudder feedback units are doing. We're also looking into getting a backup steering system. However, for that type of work, we've got to come up with a design, which we will work on with Elliott Bay Design Group, as well as some local vendors here in Bellingham who have experience with it and can help us sort of nail down the terminology to use. And then we got to package all that up and we got to send it to the Marine Safety Center in Washington, D.C. so they can say yes or no. In the meantime, we're not going to have that level of work done before May. However, what we are going to do is swap out those rudder feedback units in May. And what the hope was we could keep new rudder feedback units in there for a longer period of time before they failed or we needed to replace them, because they were part of this new digital steering system that we took on board. And one of the sales pitches around the new digital steering system, and I shouldn't say sales pitch, that's the wrong word. We needed to update the steering system because it was totally antiquated and there was getting to be very few people that even knew how to work on it. Parts were becoming unavailable and whatnot. So that's what drove us to upgrade to the digital steering system. However, one of the benefits of the digital steering system was supposed to be these new, robust, totally watertight rudder feedback units. And that just wasn't the case. So these rudder feedback units are lasting as long or even maybe not as long as the old original ones. And really the best way to combat that is just to crop them out, replace them every yearly maintenance period. If we do that, they shouldn't ever have a problem. So we're going to continue to do that while we're also pushing the ball upfield with the Marine Safety Center with regards to a backup steering system and also trying to remote locate those rudder feedback units somewhere else. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. You mentioned a couple of times ago that you discovered that the boxes these digital systems go in, they were aluminum and steel screws were being used to secure them, and that was why they leaked. But is there more to the problem than just making stainless throughout, or, so that seemingly obvious problem to technicians anyway won't be repeated?
The answer to that in short is yes. I mean, we can't really replace those screws with aluminum screws because that won't be strong enough. So what we are doing is giving, Gary Poole during his maintenance, he's checking out the boxes, he's checking the screws, and he's pulling those screws out, putting grease on them, driving them back in there carefully to try to insulate them from electrolysis. And that's really all we can do. It's all even the manufacturers suggested us do. That's aside from moving them or just putting new ones in every year, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Jim.
Well, I've had similar problems with the sound systems and things, and we found that the way to do things was to put everything in plastic boxes, and it really made a difference. These things were up on roofs and towers and everything else, and even one time I took the aluminum boxes, put them inside plastic boxes, sealed everything, used sealing grommet nuts and the whole shebang, and never had a problem with it afterwards. So that would be one thing I would think might be a good idea. Anytime you got metal in direct, indirect environment, then you get problems, especially in rain. In my fishing desk, I used to have that problem.
So Jim, so were you just so that metal box you were referring to, you guys would just basically just surround that as best you could with another plastic box just to give it another layer of protection?
Yes, we did that. It seemed to cure it. No, I can't say it was, they weren't saltwater environments. I did have some problem with that in the fish boat in Alaska, and you know, I did similar things. They weren't as they had to do with mostly radio equipment. But the other thing I'd like to see is, you know, this engine thing that may be coming up. I just do not see that the Whatcom Chief is worth putting new engines in. And so I'd like to suggest that you get a spare head and a spare camshaft and things like that, and just throw it in the shelf in case there's a problem. And then I know that as I know from what I know, are the engines in the boat, are those the original ones you bought from Caterpillar, or are they the replacement?
No, they're rebuilds from about 8 years ago, I believe.
Okay, so then the original ones from Caterpillar they're been remanufactured and ready to go back in, right?
Yeah, and we've got a brand new remanufactured engines, blocks, cams, heads, everything out at the county shop, 2 of them.
Okay, well, I think I would get just a head for spare and a camshaft. They're not that expensive. They're fairly easy to get. From what I understand on the like replacement, as long as you've got the thing, you can keep like replacing it. And the question is, if you have to go buy it, they don't like that. But if you have it, I don't think that you have to change it. Have to change your engine types. And this is
Okay.
from looking at
I'm sorry, you don't have to change what, Jim?
the engine types, is, you know, for the newer standards. You know, we put $2 million in Whatcom Chief, and it increases the boat's value at 30,000. Kind of not worth it. Well, I would keep a pile of spares, I guess, and then they can always be sold, because those things are used in every kind of construction equipment and truck you can think of, and so they're fungible good, if nothing else, and they can always be gotten rid of and probably get your money back. We're having a problem right now. My friends who are in the engine rebuilding business are having terrible problems getting parts. And I guess they're in containers off of Los Angeles.
You know what, Jim? That is I know about that, because I don't know if I shared with you in the last meeting or not, but when we had our emergency outage and we had to tie up the chief at Colony Wharf to dive into those engines and replace those clips, they were not able to get parts, a couple of parts immediately. The only reason that we were able to get that engine totally repaired is because one of the mechanics from Tri-County, who actually used to attend beach school, he and his brother both work at Tri-County. They were working on a project together, and they had the same engine in their own personal shop, and they grabbed the parts, brand new parts that were their own, and got them on the Whatcom Chief and got us back up and going. Otherwise, it would have been a longer wait because of that parts delay problem.
Well, the thing I'm seeing is these are such common engines, and that, well, you might have to wait a month if you buy it to cut some new pieces right now, but you want to do it now, not when it's broken. And so,
Agreed.
you know, it's not, I don't know if it's a great idea to yank the head off a rebuild engine. That's sort of counterproductive, but it wouldn't be bad to get one. And
Agreed.
that and a camshaft and some bearings and that kind of stuff. I know when we looked at the Hiyu, they had enough sitting on the deck of that thing to rebuild those engines twice. And state had apparently looked at that. Because, you know, you can say it's a great, wonderful old boat and everything, but sooner or later we just have to replace it. And that's something I'll talk about later in the meeting when appropriate time comes.
Agreed. Thank you, Jim. Okay, anything else for us, Rich?
Not on my end.
I just want to thank you, Rich, for going into these details. They're important. And I hope that you'll make this a part of your presentation in future LIFAC meetings, because everyone would like to be up to date on the look ahead.
You got it, Charles. You're welcome, and thank you.
Thank you.
you. Okay. So update on the replacement ferry project. Roland, I'm so glad you joined us tonight. You threatened not to last meeting, but maybe you have an update that nobody else wanted to share and give us an update here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi,
So-
Roland.
Yeah. Hello, Rich. Yeah. Rich could have easily shared this news as anyone, but so the Granite Falls Bridge was funded through the raise grant application that we were competing for. And I dug into that. They've been trying to fund the Granite Falls Bridge since 2009. And they are running at a deadline on some of their permits and things like that. So it was really, this was the time for them to get funding. They had also done all the work. They didn't just plan on the additional funding. They had it set up and it locked in. Deputy Executive Schroeder and I spoke to one of the chief staff people for Senator Cantwell. And one thing he said was, you've applied twice. Other projects that have been in the mill for 13 years got funding, and one of a project already in Del Benny's district got funding. The chances of you getting funding along with Granite Falls was virtually impossible. So he said, first of all, don't be too discouraged by that. But one of the things that's really important is the feds like to be last money in. Now, you all recommended to the council and they approved a surcharge that's moving money towards it. We have two other things happening. We will need to be in front of the legislature for the CRAB funding, and that's $10 million over 20 years. We need to make sure that gets approved this spring and signed by the governor, and that would then be budgeted. So that is that's allocated funds. On top of that, Whatcom County Public Works and the administration need to specifically identify where the remainder of the local funds are coming from. Because right now we've identified several different sources, and we haven't really worried about it because there are several different sources, all of which can meet the need. We need to identify those and allocate those funds so that when we submit for this coming raise grant, all the other fund is locked up, allocated, ready to go. And then we'll have a much better chance with the raise grant. We have not heard from Mr. Augustine from USDOT. We will be probably meeting with him probably in January, February. That's when we'll do the debrief with him on the ranking and that sort of thing. I talked to not only the staff person from Senator Cantwell's office, but one of the people from back in DC in Rick Larson's office. And he said essentially the same thing that we heard from the other staff person from Senator Cantwell's office. Congressman Larson was up in Bellingham on Saturday, this last Saturday, and I presented to him, I gave him the download on the damages from the floods that we had in November and the landslides that have closed several roads. We lost several roads due to major road failure. And when I did that, I started in the southeast part of the county, and I worked my way up and around the county and back down to the southwest and ended with Lummi Island, and made sure that Congressman Larson was aware of all the different infrastructure needs throughout the county, and then ended with the most important critical infrastructure need, which is of course the ferry that needs to be replaced. And he nodded his head, and everything was fine. And then we talked about Beach Way and the fact that we had lost that, which was a primary access for a helicopter landing in times of emergency when the ferry is down. And I gave him a little brief on what you all were just talking about for the last 20 minutes. And that is older engines, steering, rudders, all kinds of things that are now plaguing us with just the simple fact of it being an old boat, and we need to move on. His one of his new coordination staff was there, and I gave him my card, and he said, "Well, we'll talk again." And I said, "Oh, absolutely, we will talk again." And he turned and he looked back and he said, "Well, what do you have? What you have something in mind?" And I said, "Well, if you haven't taken some time," he said, "This is my third day, so no, I haven't taken any time." I said, "Okay, well, you can read our the information with regard to Lummi Island Ferry on our website. Please do so." And we're going back forward for a raise grant, and we're looking for significant support from Congressman Larson. And I asked him also, "Have you heard whether or not the district has been changed?" And he said, "We're not speculating, but if it has changed, Congressman Larson plans to run to be in the new district, whether it's District 1, District 2, we don't know." But the map, as I've been told, the map that is sitting in front of the state Supreme Court has Lummi Island and all of Whatcom County in Larson's district. So we'll no longer be the tail end of Congresswoman Del Benny's district. We will be smack dab, you will be smack dab in the middle of Rick Larson's district. So all in all, it's good news. And we're already strategizing on making the raise grant even better than it was. And we will be moving forward with information to the legislature. With regard to that, I talked to Sharon Schumacher and Alicia Rule at the flood meeting that we had out in Everson or Nooksack a couple weeks ago. They both brought up several different issues that I'm working on, Swift Creek and other things. And one of the council members said, and Roland is one of the ones working on the new ferry, don't forget that. And they both said, "Oh yeah, we know, we understand." And I said, it is the #1 infrastructure concern that Whatcom County Public Works has. So, and the director was standing right next to me, and he didn't correct me on that. So there it is. That is it in a nutshell. We will be talking with LIFAC when we get a little closer. We'll have a better idea which committees the crab conversation will be had in. Most likely to just be in the transportation sub. So there's the committee, the overall budget committee, and then there's each area has different subcommittees, and most likely be in just the transportation subcommittee. But we'll make sure so that we can drop lines and hints and make sure our lobbyist is doing their job down there. So any questions?
Yeah, I do. Roland, I was in a meeting where Sharon Schumacher was also, and when I was asking about funding and about the ferry, she said, well, whatever the COG is sending us in their transportation plans, and that is just all part of this state level process, correct?
Yeah.
So
it's
at the COG.
Yeah, COG, it's Council of Governments is COG for those that don't know. And their job is to coordinate transportation issues. And it's the top project. So
she did say whatever COG tells me is a priority, I will, but we're sure it's a top project with them. And how do we need to lobby for that?
Certainly you do. And that would be through through the county executive's office to make sure of. It's not a formal ranking. It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a group of projects that are identified as top projects. So and the ferry project is in that group of top projects.
Okay.
It's a high priority is what they're identified. High, medium, and low, and it's identified as high.
Okay, thank
You
you.
know, Roland, how many other projects are in this top category with COG?
It comes and goes. Sometimes it's 4 or 5, and sometimes it's 15 or 20. It really kind of depends on what's happening. I imagine the, and in fact, Chris is on here. WTA puts in projects in that list as well. So, but one of the things that was said by not only the Senator Cantwell's staff, Congressman Larson said specifically, because I said, of all the earmarks that happened because of the way the district was running, Whatcom County is not going to see 1 dime of earmarked funds, nothing. And I pulled my mask down and I said, I want you to make sure you see the expression on my face that we're so happy for you all south of us that you got to get all your earmarked projects in. Thanks a lot.
And what did they say?
He backed up a little bit, and he didn't quite apologize because we're not in his district. We didn't expect him to go completely to bat for us. The fact that we were completely ignored by Susan Delbene is just the way that goes. So we are hopeful to move forward. But he did say there's a lot more money in the infrastructure appropriation than what was earmarked for those next 10 to 20 year projects. He said a lot more money. So there'll be more money in the RAISE program. There'll be more money in the federal highways program. There'll be more money in the bridge program. And I said, good. And we would like to make sure that we're going to have full consideration, just because we're way up in the northern corner here, that we're not forgotten again. And he said, you're not forgotten. And then he stopped and he pulled his mask down. He said, how the hell would I forget you? And so, I've known Congressman Larson for a long time, ever since he's been there. And so we will continue to make phone calls and move forward as much as we can with all of that. We are looking at a couple of different programs. We are on Senator Murray and Senator Cantwell's radar now more than ever. Your letters have done a tremendous amount. I'm trying to remember the person who sent the email. I don't remember her name, but it was a very heartfelt email. Her husband had a heart attack and she was sitting on the ferry waiting to get over to the hospital. And, if the ferry wasn't running, she never seen him again. And it was a very heartfelt. The whole staff at Senator Cantwell's office read that letter. They all passed it around. So, and it's a very heartfelt part of life being on the island. So having said all of that, I continue to be positive. This will get funded. There's no other way about it. It has to be. And we're going to move forward, get the funding, and get it built before Jim and Rich have to sit around and figure out what kind of camshaft they're going to have to jerry rig to shove into that thing to keep it rolling. So I'd like to put our mechanics basically out of business on these old engines and get them running on new equipment.
Roland, what is the timeline on the next raise grant application process?
Yeah, we expect it to be in May, June, just like that. Cassandra's already working on it this
Next
year. Oh yeah, yeah, it's coming up.
week?
She's already starting to do some organization, and we're looking at quite frankly, I've looked at some of the ones that were awarded, and it would be nice to say that the decisions with regard to infrastructure had nothing to do with the political process and everything to do with merit. I would say I'd like to say that. However, we're going to move on to the next topic because I can't say that. So I'm not sure how much improved we could make our application. And we've asked every person that's reviewed it in DC, and they've all said the same thing. It is a stellar application, and the only thing that we could improve this time is having all the other money allocated, not just identified, but actually allocated. So we're going to push hard to do that. And we've already started that process.
Roland, thank you for this. You mentioned going to the legislature. Their session starts in January. When do you want LIFAC to swing into action to make calls, or do we need to mobilize people like we've done for the federal officials? You mentioned that our state representatives know about this, but would additional letters, emails, phone calls ensure this happens? It seems to me from what you said, we really do have to get this $10 million, or we will fall. We will just be like last year. We won't have the money in hand, the big money in hand, come time for the raise grant. So this seems very critical. What does LIFAC and citizens in Lummi Island and on the mainland who care about this, what do we need to do?
The legislature has to send the budget back to the governor end of March, I think is when it is, April, somewhere in there. So I'm requesting anybody that's available to send letters in January, February, March, and April to all the legislators in your district and the state senators in your district, senators in your district, and the governor as well, the Office of Financial Management, and the Washington State Department of Transportation, all of those folks.
Mm-hmm.
What we need to make sure of is people understand beyond the simple or not so simple engineered application, because that's what you're reading. You don't understand the dynamics unless you are reading a letter from someone that has poignant information from of their experience and why this is so important. And that's what I'd recommend. Just as you did for the U.S. delegation, it's time to do that for the state delegation. And then we'll be turning right around in May, June, asking for those support letters, or sorry, April, May, asking for those support letters from whatever district you're in, whether it be Larson or whoever, and both the senators to get that moved forward as well as continued letters to Secretary Buttigieg.
Oh, really? So would you mind, Roland, with that in mind? My eyes kind of glaze over. I don't know who I would address some of those state letters to. Is there a way you could provide us with just a list of names and addresses that would be appropriate and helpful?
Yeah, actually, it's your district. I think you're in District 40?
42.
42.
And we know the
42.
state
Okay.
reps, but at the Department of Transportation, and I mean, is there somebody at COG? Is there?
Yeah, I'll get that. Yeah, I'll pull those together, and I'll talk to Deputy Executive Schroeder on who down in Olympia does he think is, have our lobbyist find out, who's the chair of the committee or whatever, and just we'll just start sending them letters.
Okay.
And I would think next month mid-January, probably a good place to start. And hit them early, hit them often.
Okay, do we have to send letters to Tyler and Sat Paul?
No.
They're convinced, okay. Thank you.
Well,
Any other questions?
No. Well,
Charles?
well, before we move on, I can't resist by saying thank you again for your wonderful presentation of the ins and outs of this. Of course, in our last meeting, you announced that you were leaving for other duties. And indeed, before we heard the bad news, we hope never to see you again. But you're back, and we're very pleased you're back. So thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I may be back next month if I have anything to say with regard to that additional information. But yeah, I do have those other duties that have really pulling my time. But as I said, this is the #1 priority for our infrastructure. So, and it's not like I'm abandoning it. I just need to focus on other things unless there's things for me to work on. So, and with that, if there's anything else, I am going to say good night. Any other questions?
Thank you for joining us. I have none. Nobody else?
Okay.
Judy, did you have one? No.
No, I
Okay.
was thanking Roland. Thank you, Roland.
Okay,
Thank you very much. And thank you for, showing us the way.
you bet. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Next agenda item is the naming, and boy, I feel like at our last meeting, Todd Donovan suggested he thought it was bad luck to name it before it got funded. And I don't have a report or an update from Mike on that. And the next issue is public awareness. Tome deadline is January 14th. And I'm happy to take that on, or Judy, you do a great job. Can you do that?
I think I can handle that for January.
Well, that would be lovely. That would be lovely.
Yeah.
And other outreach items that we ought to consider at this meeting?
I just point out that our next meeting, our January meeting is January 12th. So Judy could capture both today and the January meeting.
Good point. Right.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Thank you. Jim, yes,
Is this new business now? Are we on new business?
it is new business.
Okay, couple things. First of all, this process we've been going through is everybody's very cordial and very nice, but my guess is if we continue, this is my guess alone on this, trying to get money from raised grants, is we're going to be looking at least 3 more years before we get one. In the meantime, the Whatcom Chief has hit 200% of its original lifespan. We have to do something. I don't know what it is. Something different, have to go into the county funding, whatever, hope they get it back from a grant. But we need to move on, and we need to move on fairly quickly. We're going to have, to me, it looks like, I don't know if it's catastrophic failure, regulatory failure, whatever else. Every day that we don't replace the ferry, we move it closer to that problem. And Rich and the gang and everybody here has done a great job of keeping it going. Unfortunately, it's been flowing on a sea of money, but at least it's been here. And I think that we may need to start thinking and maybe a little different way of going about things. And so that's one part of what I'm going to say. The other thing is that I think we need to really investigate back, let's say if a replacement ferry is it really going to cost to keep the old girl ready on a ready reserve basis?
Oh.
And I think it won't just be dividing it by 2 or 3 or whatever else existing. It's going to be considerably less because it'll probably run less than 5% of what it's doing right now.
Jim, sorry, I'm trying to take the notes. Could you just rephrase that? I'm not getting quite clear.
Okay, where'd you lose me?
No, I'm missing some of your words, so.
Well, I think, to keep the Whatcom chief on a ready reserve basis,
Mhm.
that we need to really figure out what it's going to cost. And I think it's not going to be near as expensive as some people think, because it's going to be running probably 5% of what it does now as a reserve boat.
But it would still incur maintenance and mooring costs that.
The
And what would-
probably the most expensive mooring costs right now, our family company is negotiating a different way of getting some logs off of on the island, including one of the outfits we're going to be negotiating with. And I can get probably a pretty good idea of moorage, but I think we need to actually have this docketed in the group as a real live project, if nothing else, because and then other people will be able to vet what the other ones do and actually come up with a some sort of a small study, I guess is what I would consider.
Jim, are you suggesting this is something you are offering to pull together, or is this something?
Oh, I'll be glad to. That's no problem at all. I mean,
Do you need to be
done
involved?
sort of like this before.
Can I just interject here a little bit, Rema?
Yeah.
That's already something that Whatcom County Public Works will be doing on our own internally, is looking at those cost analysis to keep the Whatcom chief at least for the first year when the new ferry boat comes on. That's certainly going to give us a really good idea of what it would take, what it would cost to keep in the short term and the long term. So that's something we'll be doing on our own.
Well, there are some things which there are other ways to do some of the things, and I think we need to look at those too.
Okay, well, do you think that is going to meet your needs, or you're just saying it would be, you can't wait to read the report that they come up with as they.
Oh, I'm not saying that I won't read. I can't wait. Well, I'm talking.
Okay,
But I think that there are some other perhaps ways in which to accomplish the same goal at cost less.
Okay.
And I'm currently negotiating with the Port of Bellingham and with Colony Wharf right now and some other places. And there's also other, if you go park it in full salt water, you're going to have a lot more damage than if you can park it in brackish water somewhere. And so that's, I'm considering, some of that.
okay.
Jim, you're talking about the chief after we get the new ferry, but when you started, I thought you were worried
when I
about the
first started
delay
was-
in getting the new ferry.
What I first started was is that we may have to step outside the normal box of procurement to get this thing going, because otherwise that we may be waiting a long time. And I think it's time that we push through this. We started talking, what was it, 2008 was with, and I understand it was even before, well, I know it was before that, because the charrette meetings that went on in the early 2000s and talking about replacing the Whatcom chief, then of course the 2008 and then the ferry task force. We've been at this a long time. And the thing is, we've got to do it. And what would be real nice to keep taking this time to do this, and everybody be pleasant and whatever else, and go with the flow and all. I don't think we're going to have to do something a little different, and I don't know what it is yet, but this is
You're
my
basically
feelings.
talking about finding funding from another source. Is that what I'm gathering?
Well, I think the county could probably fund it themselves and try to collect the money from the other source somewhere later. They do have reserves.
Does
And
anyone,
we may be into that point.
Rich, you're probably the best person. Back in the days when we were talking about ferry design and whatnot, what sort of time frame are we assuming for the building, from the time that funds are available to start building and to the time that new ferries in the water and operating? What kind of time?
Yeah, I mean, from the time, my understanding is, Judy, that from the time we get money in hand, we're going to be about 18 months of developing final design and contracts and having it go out to bid. That's also assuming that the, all the permitting for the terminals and all that business is ready to go as well.
Okay, so I'm not sure I followed exactly 18 months for the entire project, or 18 months for getting
18 months for the whole project. Yeah.
the whole.
You mean
think that's-
from getting the money to putting it in the water, only 18 months?
That's correct.
Ooh,
18 months to 2 years, as long as all the permits are done and everything is ready to go on the terminal side of things, then yeah, 18 months.
yeah.
New ferry boat.
Wait a minute, so if we got the money, if the raise grant had been approved this time and the money came through next month, then we'd have a new ferry by middle of 2023?
Sorry, no, because at that 18 months, assuming all the permits for the infrastructure at the terminal facilities is complete.
Well, give us an
that's a big-
estimate. Give us an estimate of the likely total duration, as Judy said, from dollars in hand to boat in the water.
That's 18 months.
Well,
No,
From
but
what I've been
add in a factor for these permitting processes.
I don't know. I can't speak to that because I'm not fully aware of what the permitting process is and how long it's going to take. But I do know from the time we get the money to do final design on the boat and get the boat built. Well, I'm going to back that up a little bit, Charles. I'm sorry. It would probably be closer to a year of final design and then 18 months to build. That's
Okay,
probably more realistic.
okay.
from what I found out, talking to Nichols in several operations, is you're probably looking at around 3 years. Once the green light comes on, that's what they told me.
Is there somebody working on permitting now, though, Rich? I mean, is there any reason to not be working that angle of it so it will go as quickly as?
That is moving forward.
It is.
The beginnings of permitting for sure, that for internal facilities, that is moving forward.
So I guess the reason I was asking that question is that I think if you want to take 2026 as the ultimate completion date to have a new vessel and you work backwards, it seems to me that this next cycle of raise grant is going to be the critical one. I think if it doesn't happen next time, then I agree with you, Jim. It's time to start thinking about something else. And I'm really disappointed that it didn't come through this time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Two things I would say about that, Judy, is one, 2026 is no longer currently the drop dead date because we've been able to keep those engines that we have in there in service for another year. And we may, based on Tri-County Marine, based on their findings, we may be able to keep them for another additional year. So the 2026 drop dead date is getting slowly pushed out the longer that we maintain and keep our engines going. The other thing I would say is internally in Whatcom County, we are looking at all sorts of other funding models for this project. Of course, that is a little bit new as well because we just found out that the raise grant that we did not get. So now there's internal conversations already happening about that. The other thing I would say is I do disagree with Jim as far as the Whatcom chief having some major catastrophic failure that it doesn't come back from as far as from a regulatory standpoint or a mechanical one. That's not a concern of mine.
So what I'm hearing though from the start of this conversation is Jim is suggesting that we actually add the what about the chief scenario as an agenda item going forward to to keep track of what you are finding out in terms of costs and options in terms of the future, at the same time as we try to fund the replacement ferry. But let's look at options of keeping the Whatcom Chief as a reserve ferry, and what would that take? What would that incur? Can we add that?
Yep, and
item?
that is something we will do. You can add it to the agenda, but we won't be acting on it anytime soon. Probably won't be until after May, to be honest.
Okay, so it's on the to-do list, but not till May.
Yeah, I would say after May, after the next maintenance period is completed with the Whatcom Chief, we can start digging into some other things, and we get a new ER&R manager hired and some other internal business taken care of.
Okay, all right, Jim.
Okay.
Bring that up.
I can start.
I think this is very,
One thing I would like to say is the Whatcom Chief is costing a huge amount of money, more than probably anybody ever thought to keep going. On the other hand, that it's my opinion with the way things are growing here and within the county, thanks, the pandemic has just thrown the paradigm of growth out the window that we've been running on for years. That we are also losing revenue that we would otherwise get with the larger ferry. So in using my friends who are in the truck driving business as a model, when something becomes at a certain point, they get rid of it and they get a new machine. And they, of course, these are private companies. And so I think that we need to be looking at that, because it's great to keep an icon around, but then again, it's not great when it's starting to cost you money. And that's one thing I want to, I want to keep that in everybody's eyesight.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, did you have another issue to bring up, Jim?
Not really. One thing I'm going to send everybody. A friend of mine from Texas sent me this hysterical, satirical thing of batteries in cars. And you look at it, it's funny, but it's not funny because it's continual. It goes up. What does it really cost to build these batteries? And it was a shocker to me. I mean, I knew all this, but I never had it in one spot at a time. And I'm going to send that to everybody. It's sort of funny, it's a talking battery. And I think we need to look at that there may be other ways.
Okay, well, if it's something you just want to share with the group, please feel free to do that. And you know what, Charles, I skipped over the short.
yeah, I have another question before we move on, a question for Rich. I just want to summarize the timeline that Judy very usefully introduced here. So assuming an optimistic scenario of the raised grant, and Jim's, we get it in 2022, let's suppose middle of the year, and Jim's estimate of 3 years start to finish to get a new boat, then that would be the middle of 2025. You've just said that the drop dead date for the chief has now been, I thought it was 2029, but you say it was 2026 and now it's 2027?
Sorry, I'm sorry, Charles. I don't have that information in front of me right now. 2029, if that was what the drop dead date was, I don't have that, because my intent, it's not something that I am scrutinizing all the time, because my job is going to be to keep that boat going, whether or not 2029 comes and goes or not. It doesn't matter to me that much, because I'm going to keep the boat going. But if it's 2029, then I would say yes, we push that out another year. Whatever that drop dead date was, which I don't have in front of me.
Yeah, the drop dead was from previous meetings where I can't put my finger on it, but I'm just trying to help this conversation by saying, in the best scenario, we would have a boat by late 2025, early 2026. And in the worst case,
Yep.
we might not have one until, say, 2025, which would be 2028, and then we would be in a real mess. And each year of delay increases the heft and importance of Jim's argument.
Right,
That's all I'm saying.
okay. Thank you. And good point. And Charles, you were going to give us an update on the shore power study. It's still something you are working on, correct?
That's correct. And I'm hoping to give a report at the January, or I'm planning to give a report on the whole thing at January meeting. We haven't yet because for obvious reasons, the county is giving, quite rightly giving priority to the people whose lives and livelihoods have been ruined by the flooding. So Todd Donovan is going to aim to schedule a meeting as Public Works recommended sometime, I don't know, after Christmas. Anyway, we hope and aim to have that before our January 12th meeting, so I can give you a report on what was said.
Perfect. Thank you. We skipped over, or well, we moved it to the end here. Open session. We have Mike and Bill and Dave. Chris, comments? Chris?
Yes, I should have brought it up in the other section, just the internal business. I did want to say I tried to get started on the online application for vacancy for myself today, but we're having kind of real problematic internet, and a certain provider for phone and internet. We're going like 2 weeks without decent service. So anyway, I'm a little delayed, but I'm working on that, and I should have brought it up in the internal business. So that's all.
Thank you.
Wonderful, Chris.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, you would be a source.
Well, this is good. Congratulations. You know, you can, I hope your printer works. You can always put it in the mail. Just a thought.
Yes, I've already printed one, but well, one way or another.
Okay.
Okay.
Other comments?
I'd like to hear from the other gentlemen that are here, what they're thinking.
Bill just had
Bill,
his hand up.
Bill Sager, yeah?
Yeah, hi guys. One of the things that's an observation after the last couple meetings I've been at is I know everyone has had a lot of faith and hope in the ferry system. Hats off to Rich and the team for everything they've done. But as we look for that, even talking about the years that we're just talking about, to me, I think we also have to really at this committee take a hard look at what the risk mitigation is when a breakdown actually occurs. If we're talking about this, the ferry has to be replaced. To me, I hear that it's going to take longer and longer, and when it goes out. I mean, Rich mentioned the fact that if they couldn't have found those clips, the emergency outage could have taken longer, and just to get that replaced. And I don't think that there's a great analysis on what the impact is when we switch to that passenger ferry, which I really hope that county understands. And I love Jim's idea of bringing and keeping the chief, if we can, as an alternative to the passenger only ferry. But I think some of those stories as well could really help sell the story for the grant basis, but we also just need to go into the next couple of years trying to outline, here's the risks, what's it mean, how do we mitigate that, knowing that we don't have a new ferry. What's it mean to leave a car on the other side in Gooseberry when just because you showed up trying to get home from work, and take in all those stories and understand and see what we can do to do better. So.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, David.
Unmute. Well, since Jim invited comment, I'll just say a couple of things. I've spent most of my adult life working in and around grants in various capacities, writing them, reading them, even awarding them. And so I don't have a lot of background in public works grants, but I have some. So this is kind of familiar territory for me. And I would say this, based on Roland's comments, the debriefing that he mentioned, by the way, I've read the NOFO quite carefully for the raised grant, so I understand the mechanics of how things work. Roland mentioned the debriefing step that won't happen for, I gather, a month or two. And I think that's absolutely critical in order for the county to have a better hand, and for us really to have a better handle on what our chances are for the next submission or the submission after that or whatever. And my personal view is that there are some headwinds associated with this. Some of it might be competition from other grants that have been in the queue longer. But I think beyond that, I see a couple of issues that might hurt our chances. One is the benefit to cost ratio. The NOFO states quite clearly that unless it exceeds 1.0, it's very unlikely that that project will get forwarded to the secretary for consideration amongst the highly rated proposals. And the draft that I saw, the CBR is 0.56. So it doesn't meet that threshold. And that
It's what again?
0.56.
Okay.
In what I believe was close to the final proposal. So it doesn't meet that threshold. And there have to be some pretty significant mitigating factors, I think, to expect an award for a grant, a proposal that has such a low benefit to cost ratio. And the other thing that concerns me is it says, and this is really common in my experience in federal grant programs, is if it's resubmitted, if it hasn't been substantially changed, the program staff have the option of not reading it again or not reevaluating it, and simply assigning it the last score that it got. And so if your proposal's kind of down in the mid-range somewhere, maybe not super competitive, then it can be very hard to push it up into the competitive range because they may not choose to read it. So those are the things that worry me a little bit. But I think, again, it's just so much will be learned from that debriefing session. We should find out whether the grant was recommended for funding or merely acceptable or, heaven forbid, unacceptable. There's four categories that every grant gets placed in this program. So that's my comment. I think that information will really help us maybe look in the crystal ball a little bit. But I wouldn't necessarily assume that just because we go back again next year that we should get our hopes up.
Thank you.
Sorry to be a naysayer. But.
Thank you.
No,
Charles, yeah.
no, this is very good. Thank you for contributing this, David. And I guess I won't go into a lot of detail here other than these are things that I hope you will have time to look into more and maybe advise LIFAC or join LIFAC or somehow bring these more, onto the table here. Particularly your second point, your third point about the resubmitted proposal, if it's not changed, might not even be looked at again, or it might be assigned the same score. I think that's very serious. Just means we're treading water. And
potentially, yes.
Potentially. So that raises the question of what kind of change, given that the county Public Works has paid money to a consulting firm, KPFF, to write the proposal. Many people have looked at it and chewed on it. And is it possible to find out to any degree? I guess you're answering this by saying the debriefing will tell us the answer to this question. Are we?
That is my hope.
Yeah.
It it can vary quite a bit. I had a go around with FEMA a year ago about firefighting equipment. I worked on a grant, and there you couldn't get a very satisfactory answer as to how the prior proposal fared. There was a certain amount of, well, it was okay, and if you do this, you do that, but we couldn't find out where we stood. And then when we resubmitted it, it actually fared worse, even though we thought we'd improved the proposal a lot. So hopefully this information that this Mr. Augustine will provide Roland with will be what I would call firmer intel about how the grant was received.
Right. Thank you very much. I think Jim had a question.
Well, this is a terrible thing to say, but it's almost as if that the bloody thing's bow's got to be sticking up the current ferry's bow has got to be sticking up above the water, and there's smoke coming out of the pilot house. That's about the time we're going to get a grant. And I mean, it's awful. We've recently apparently had a massive degradation of one of the ferries the track has been sold. It's so it might still be available, but I don't know. The former owner, who I got to be pretty good friends with, has moved on. He's out of the business. And so that's kind of, that isn't there anymore. And so, and then the other thing I understand is Foss Shipyard is closed. Rich, you might know more about that.
Yep, I sure do.
Okay.
Rayma, could I add one comment to my earlier comment just about the RAISE program? It's possible to download an Excel spreadsheet where you can review the history of all 680 proposals, projects that have been funded since the inception of the program in 2009. And one thing I found interesting is that they have never funded a ferry vessel. And they've only funded one project with the word ferry in it. It was a ferry terminal in New Orleans. That could be a good news, bad news thing. There's a novelty to our proposal, but it's clearly not. This is a surface. It's first and foremost, it's a surface transportation grant program, bridges and highways traditionally, and with the new administration, they rewrote the parts of the NOFO to put a lot of emphasis on things like racial equity, environmental justice, and DOT is very proud of the fact that they funded some projects for greenways and what do they call them? Complete streets, which are streets for all modes of transportation, not just automobiles and trucks. So I don't know whether that helps us or hurts us, but there is no history of funding a vessel in the RAISE program so far.
Rich, can you hire him? No.
Yeah, I would comment that the last RAISE grant that we did not receive, not this year's but last year's, he's absolutely right that the grading that came in really highlighted, if you all recall, the reason, one of the primary reasons at that time they say we didn't receive the grant was because our funding package and how we planned to pay for the project was very unclear. We spent a lot of time working on that over the last year in preparation for resubmittal. So I'm on board. I can't wait to see what they say or where we fall now or what the demerits were against us. Be interesting.
So Rich, will you be in that meeting, or do you know who was in that last debriefing meeting? Do you remember?
I think the last one I was invited. I had another commitment, but Elizabeth will certainly be in there, as well. I'm guessing Roland. I don't know for sure. Certainly Liz.
Thank you for those comments. Anything else?
Thank you both, David and Bill, for your attendance and your comments. Really valuable.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Very thoughtful and hopefully helpful. So appreciate that. I think the meeting's officially over at this point. I appreciate everybody's attendance.
Oh,
Okay.
isn't there one thing, don't we have to talk about the hybrid meeting?
Oh, it's still, Rich, is there an update on getting together? I'm sorry, are you talking about,
The LIFAC meeting,
I'm sorry, the which meeting?
the hybrid LIFAC meeting. Or the-
Yeah, we did discuss that, and that there's no place to meet right now. So at least for December, until we hear differently, it'll have to be on Zoom, I do believe. Okay.
You mean January? We're doing December
I'm
now.
sorry, January.
Yeah, right.
January.
Oh.
But the grants, LICA will have to see if there's any funding unless there are other ideas. But I did send in an application to say we would love to be able to meet at the Grange. And I think I shared that Mary Ross said she would help with any technical side of it to make it a hybrid meeting if that was what was going to happen. Is there another, that's all I talked about on that. Are there other suggestions on meeting in person that you want us to pursue? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you all for being
Well,
here.
I'd just like to point out that Rama might not be in this meeting, or because she's actually in New York City. And so we thank you for tuning in, even though it's rather later at night there than here. So thank you very much.
Mike Seahan wouldn't have, and Dave Parker wouldn't have, so, and Chris, you
right.
probably wouldn't have come across, would you?
Happy holidays, everybody.
Mhm.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a
Thank you.
good holiday time.
Same to you.
And
Thank
thank you to everyone.
All right,
And Rama, you can send me the recording and I'll work on it.
perfect. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good night.